The morning sun had barely climbed over the city skyline when the hospital parking lot began to fill up. It was the start of another busy week at St. Mary's General Hospital, one of the biggest medical centers in the area. Inside, nurses hurried through the halls. Doctors checked charts, and the sound of footsteps and beeping machines blended into the usual Monday rhythm. In the reception area, Nurse Ellen Matthews was already at her desk. She'd been working at the hospital for almost 8 years. Mondays were always tough, but today felt worse. The computers had frozen twice that morning. 2 patients had shown up angry about their bills, and another had fainted right in front of her desk while waiting to be seen. Ellen sighed as she straightened the stack of forms on her counter. Her shift had barely started, and she already felt drained. Around 9 o'clock, a woman walked in through the sliding glass doors. She looked calm, dressed neatly but casually. Dark jeans, a white blouse, and a gray cardigan. She carried a small bag and wore no visible makeup or jewelry, just a pair of glasses that framed her thoughtful eyes. She moved with quiet confidence, but not in a way that drew attention. Ellen glanced up for a moment and then went back to typing on her computer. "Next, please," she said, not looking up again. The woman stepped closer to the counter and said in a polite voice, "Good morning. I'm here to speak with someone in administration. I was told I could come by today." Ellen didn't even hear the full sentence. She just saw another walk-in without an appointment. The waiting room was already packed, and she didn't have the energy to explain policies again. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said quickly, keeping her eyes on the monitor. "We're not taking walk-ins today. If you don't have an appointment, you'll have to come back another time." The woman hesitated for a second. Ellen cut her off before she could finish. "You can call the main office and schedule something. We can't have people just showing up. We're already behind." A few people in the waiting room glanced over. The woman stood still for a moment. There was no anger on her face, just quiet understanding. She smiled softly and said, "All right. Thank you for your time." Then she stepped aside and took a seat on one of the empty chairs near the wall. Ellen didn't think twice about it. She went back to her computer, clicking through screens, trying to catch up on her paperwork. To her, it was just another person without an appointment, someone who didn't follow hospital rules. But to everyone's surprise, the woman didn't leave. She sat patiently, looking around the room as if she had all the time in the world. Her calm presence was oddly comforting. She smiled at an elderly man who looked anxious, nodded to a young mother bouncing a baby on her knee, and offered her seat to someone who seemed more tired than she was. After about 15 minutes, the young receptionist beside Ellen leaned over and whispered, "That lady. She's been sitting there for a while. Should we check who she's waiting for?" Ellen shook her head. "If she doesn't have an appointment, there's nothing to check. People always say they know someone in administration. I've heard that line 100 times. It's always a waste of time." The receptionist nodded but looked uncertain. Something about the woman didn't feel like a random visitor. She carried herself differently. Not like a patient, not like someone lost. There was a quiet authority in her posture. Meanwhile, the woman continued to sit patiently. She watched the flow of people, the frustration, the rush, the fatigue that filled the room. A nurse passing by accidentally bumped into a man with crutches, spilling some papers. The woman immediately stood up to help gather them, smiling gently as she handed them back. Ellen saw it but didn't think much of it. She was too busy managing the chaos behind the counter. By 10 o'clock, things had only gotten worse. A patient was arguing over a bill. The printer ran out of ink and the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Ellen's nerves were stretched thin. She muttered under her breath about how people didn't understand how hard hospital staff worked. Just then, a middle-aged man in a suit came through the door. He looked around the lobby before spotting the woman sitting quietly. His expression immediately changed, surprise then embarrassment. He hurried over and said, "Dr. Morris, I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. We weren't expecting you until next week." Everyone nearby turned to look. Ellen froze. The name echoed in her mind, Dr. Morris. She had seen that name before on a memo that went out last week. The memo had been about the hospital's new director, Dr. Angela Morris, the woman who had just been sitting in her waiting area, the same one she had turned away without a second thought. Ellen's heart dropped into her stomach. She quickly stood up, her face turning pale. The woman she had dismissed so casually now stood with the man in the suit, greeting him with a polite handshake. She didn't look upset or proud, just calm, steady, and professional. The man continued speaking. "We've been preparing your office and staff meeting, but I had no idea you were visiting early. If I'd known, I would have met you at the entrance." "It's all right," Dr. Morris said with a smile. "I wanted to come by quietly today. Sometimes it's better to see how things work when no one knows you're coming." Her words were kind, but there was meaning behind them. Ellen felt her throat tighten. Dr. Morris glanced back at the reception counter, not with anger but with quiet curiosity. Her gaze met Ellen's for just a second. Ellen quickly looked away, her cheeks burning. The rest of the staff looked uncomfortable too. The receptionist beside Ellen bit her lip, pretending to focus on the phone. Even the patients seemed to sense something had just happened, though no one said a word. Dr. Morris turned back to the man in the suit. "Shall we?" she said, motioning toward the hallway. They walked off together, leaving behind a silent, tense lobby. As soon as the doors closed behind them, Ellen exhaled sharply, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Her heart was still racing. She couldn't believe what had just happened. The young receptionist leaned toward her and whispered, "That's the new director? The one from the memo?" Ellen nodded slowly, barely able to speak. "Yes, and I just told her to come back another time." She sank back into her chair, feeling dizzy. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Every sound, every voice felt far away. All she could think about was the calm look in Dr. Morris's eyes when she walked away. Not angry, not smug, just disappointed. Ellen replayed the moment in her mind again and again. How many times had she brushed people off like that? How many times had she assumed someone didn't belong just because of how they looked or spoke? For years, Ellen had prided herself on being efficient. She handled dozens of patients a day, memorized policies, and kept things moving. But efficiency wasn't the same as kindness. And today she had been reminded of that in the most humiliating way. During her lunch break, Ellen sat alone in the cafeteria, pushing her food around the tray. Her appetite was gone. She overheard two nurses talking about how the new director was already meeting department heads and walking through each unit to observe how things were run. "She's really calm," one nurse said. "Not the kind of person who raises her voice. But she notices everything." "Yeah," the other replied. "Apparently she's been working in hospital leadership for over a decade. People say she's strict but fair." Ellen swallowed hard. She wondered if Dr. Morris would mention her behavior in the next staff meeting. Would she be written up? Transferred? Fired? The thought made her stomach twist. Later that afternoon, Ellen was called into her supervisor's office. Her heart pounded as she walked down the hall. The door was open and she saw Dr. Morris standing near the window, speaking softly with the supervisor. When she turned around and saw Ellen, she smiled kindly. "You must be Nurse Matthews," she said. "Please come in." Ellen hesitated, then stepped inside. She could feel her palms sweating. Dr. Morris didn't look angry. Her tone was calm and even. "I wanted to thank you for your work today," she began. "I know it's been a difficult morning. Mondays are never easy in healthcare." Ellen blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you, ma'am, and I owe you an apology." "I didn't realize—" Dr. Morris raised a hand gently. "You don't have to apologize right now. I understand you were doing your job. But I do want to talk later. Not about punishment, but about how we treat people the moment they walk in the door." Ellen nodded, relief and shame washing over her at once. "Yes, of course. I'd appreciate that." Dr. Morris gave a small, understanding smile. "Good. We'll talk soon." When Ellen left the office, she felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because she hadn't been scolded, heavier because she knew she had failed at something much deeper than just customer service. The rest of her shift passed quietly. She found herself watching how she spoke to people, how she made eye contact, how quickly she judged who was important and who wasn't. Every patient began to look different to her now. Every tired face, every frustrated complaint, every person who just wanted to be seen. As the sun began to set outside the hospital windows, Ellen finished her paperwork and shut down her computer. The lobby had finally quieted down. She looked over at the chair where Dr. Morris had sat that morning. It was empty now, but the image of her sitting there calmly, waiting without complaint, stayed in Ellen's mind. That night, driving home, Ellen couldn't stop thinking about it. The day had started like any other, rushed, stressful, exhausting. But it ended with something she didn't expect, a lesson she wouldn't forget. She realized that hospitals weren't just places where people came for medicine. They were places where people came to be treated like human beings. Sometimes all it took to make someone's day better was a moment of kindness, a smile, or just the willingness to listen. She had forgotten that somewhere along the way, but maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call she needed. The next morning, Ellen arrived early. She brewed a pot of coffee for the staff and made sure the front desk looked tidy. When the first patient walked in, she smiled warmly and said, "Good morning, how can I help you today?" And for the first time in a long while, she meant it. The next morning came quietly. The air outside the hospital was cool and misty, and a soft breeze carried the smell of rain from the night before. Ellen sat in her car for a few minutes before walking in. She looked at the hospital building and sighed. It was strange. She had worked here for years, but after what happened yesterday, it suddenly looked different to her. Bigger, maybe. Or heavier. She thought about Dr. Morris all night. The calm look in her eyes, the gentle tone of her voice. There was something powerful about someone who didn't have to raise their voice to make a point. Ellen couldn't stop replaying their short conversation in her mind. "We'll talk soon," Dr. Morris had said. Those words carried both comfort and weight. Inside, the hospital was already alive. The smell of coffee filled the staff room, and nurses hurried past with clipboards in hand. Ellen clocked in and walked to her station. Her co-worker, the younger receptionist from the day before, greeted her with a smile. "Morning," she said. "Yesterday was something, huh?" Ellen forced a small laugh. "Yeah, you could say that." They exchanged a look that said everything words couldn't. Everyone had heard what happened, or at least some version of it. A few people gave her sympathetic glances as they passed by. Others whispered quietly, trying not to be obvious. Ellen pretended not to notice, but inside her stomach was tight. She decided the only thing she could do now was focus on her work. She wanted to show that she could do better. She greeted every patient with warmth, took her time listening, and tried not to let the stress make her sharp. It was harder than she thought. Habits didn't change overnight. By mid-morning, the waiting room was full again. A mother came in with her teenage son who had a bad cough. An older man was arguing about his insurance. A woman in a wheelchair asked for help filling out forms. Ellen moved from one person to the next, doing her best to stay patient. Dr. Morris was somewhere in the building, visiting different departments. Ellen hadn't seen her yet, but everyone was talking about her. The lab staff said she'd asked detailed questions about how samples were handled. The janitorial team said she thanked them personally for their hard work. Even the cafeteria workers mentioned she had stopped by to compliment the food. "She's different," one nurse said quietly near the vending machine. "Not like the last director. She actually listens." Ellen heard these comments as she passed by, and part of her felt even more guilty. The woman she had brushed off yesterday wasn't just the new boss. She was someone people already respected. Someone who led with kindness. Later that afternoon, Ellen got a call from the main office asking her to come upstairs. Her heart skipped. It was Dr. Morris's floor. She smoothed her uniform and took a deep breath before stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, she could hear her heartbeat in her ears. When she reached the top floor, everything looked cleaner and quieter than the busy halls below. A secretary greeted her politely and said, "Dr. Morris will see you in a few minutes." Ellen sat on a small couch by the wall. The seconds dragged by slowly. She glanced at the framed pictures on the wall, photos of doctors, nurses, and volunteers from years past. One of them showed a smiling team of hospital staff holding hands after a charity event. Ellen wondered how many of them had gone through moments like this, mistakes they had to face, lessons they had to learn the hard way. Finally, the door opened. Dr. Morris stepped out, holding a folder. She smiled as soon as she saw Ellen. "Thank you for waiting. Come in." Ellen stood up quickly and followed her into the office. It wasn't overly fancy, just a clean, organized space with a desk, a few chairs, and large windows overlooking the city. A small plant sat by the window and the smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air. Dr. Morris motioned for her to sit. "I know yesterday must have been uncomfortable for you," she began softly. "It wasn't how I planned my first day either." Ellen nodded, feeling her face warm. "I'm so sorry for how I spoke to you. I should have listened before assuming anything. I was stressed, but that's not an excuse." Dr. Morris listened quietly, her hands folded on the desk. When Ellen finished, she said, "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate honesty more than perfection. We all make mistakes. It's what we do afterward that matters. Ellen looked up, surprised. She expected anger, maybe disappointment, but not this calm understanding. Dr. Morris continued, "Yesterday wasn't about you alone. What happened told me something bigger, about how our hospital might be losing its warmth. People are tired, overworked, and sometimes forget why they started doing this job in the first place." Ellen nodded slowly. "That's true. Some days it feels like there's no time for kindness. Everyone's rushing." Dr. Morris leaned back in her chair. "That's exactly what I want to change. Hospitals aren't just buildings full of medicine. They're places where people come scared, hurt, or confused. And the first person they meet, often someone like you, can shape their whole experience." Her words hit deep. Ellen felt them in her chest. She thought about all the times she had brushed someone off because she was too busy or too tired. How many people had left feeling unwelcome because of her tone or expression? "I understand," Ellen said quietly. "I didn't realize how much it matters. But now I do." Dr. Morris smiled gently. "Good, that's all I wanted to hear. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to build a better culture. I'd like your help with that." Ellen blinked, confused. "My help?" "Yes," Dr. Morris said. "You've been here a long time. You know this hospital better than most. I want to start a new training program for staff. Not the boring kind full of slides, but one that helps us reconnect with why we do what we do. Real stories, real experiences. You'd be great at helping with that." Ellen's eyes widened. "You want me to help lead that?" Dr. Morris nodded. "You've learned something powerful. And people listen to those who've made mistakes and grown from them. You could be an example." Ellen didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was gratitude. "I'd be honored," she said softly. Dr. Morris stood and extended her hand. "Then we'll work together. And for what it's worth, I'm glad we met the way we did. Sometimes the hardest moments create the strongest lessons." Ellen shook her hand, feeling something shift inside her in a mix of relief and purpose. After the meeting, she walked out of the office feeling lighter. The hallway didn't seem as intimidating anymore. She passed a few people who gave her curious looks, but she didn't care. She knew what she had to do next. Back at the front desk, the young receptionist asked, "How did it go?" Ellen smiled, a genuine one this time. "Better than I expected. She's not what I thought she'd be." Over the next few days, Ellen watched Dr. Morris move through the hospital like a quiet storm of change. She didn't just sit in meetings, she spent time everywhere. She talked to janitors, nurses, doctors, and even patients' families. She asked real questions and listened without interrupting. When a nurse complained about burnout, Dr. Morris didn't give a lecture. She asked what could help and took notes. When a patient praised a staff member, she made sure that person got recognized publicly. Slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. People started smiling more. Departments that used to argue started talking again. Even the patients seemed calmer, sensing something different in the air. Ellen noticed her own behavior changing too. She began greeting everyone with warmth no matter how busy she was. She learned to pause and listen, even when things got hectic. It wasn't easy. Old habits tried to creep back in. But she reminded herself of that moment in the waiting room when she had dismissed Dr. Morris. She never wanted to repeat that mistake. One afternoon, Ellen was helping an elderly woman who was having trouble filling out some paperwork. Her hands shook as she held the pen. "I can't see very well," the woman said softly. "I'm sorry I'm taking so long." "It's all right," Ellen said with a kind smile. "Take your time. We're not in a rush." The woman smiled back, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you, dear. You remind me of my daughter." That small moment stayed with Ellen the whole day. It was simple, but it felt meaningful, like she was finally doing what she was meant to do. Later that week, Dr. Morris called her again, this time to join a small meeting with a few other staff members. They sat in a circle, sharing stories about times they'd felt disconnected from their work. Some spoke about exhaustion, others about losing empathy after years in the system. Dr. Morris listened carefully to each one. When it was Ellen's turn, she took a deep breath and told her story. Not just about what happened with Dr. Morris, but about the years of stress, the long shifts, the emotional burnout. She spoke honestly, not hiding her flaws. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one of the other nurses nodded and said, "I've been there too." That was the beginning of something new. The staff started meeting every 2 weeks for open conversations about their experiences. It became a safe place to vent, learn, and grow. People began to trust each other again. Dr. Morris often attended quietly, taking notes or just listening. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her words always carried weight. Ellen realized that real leadership wasn't about being in charge, it was about lifting others up. And real compassion wasn't about grand gestures, it was about small, consistent kindness. One evening, as Ellen was getting ready to leave, Dr. Morris passed by the front desk. "Good night, Nurse Matthews," she said warmly. "Thank you for today." "Good night, Dr. Morris," Ellen replied. "And thank you for giving me another chance." Dr. Morris smiled. "Everyone deserves one, especially those who learn from it." As she walked away, Ellen felt a quiet pride. She had started this week feeling humiliated and uncertain, but now she felt hopeful. Not just for herself, but for the hospital, for what it could become. That night, driving home, she thought about how strange life was. Yesterday's mistake had become today's turning point. Sometimes, the people we least expect to teach us something end up changing everything. She didn't know what challenges were coming next. Hospitals never stopped being busy, but she knew she'd face them differently now. With patience, with kindness, with understanding. And for the first time in a long while, she smiled all the way home. The hospital was unusually quiet that morning. A light drizzle tapped gently against the tall glass windows, and the gray clouds outside gave everything a calm, sleepy feel. Ellen arrived early again, like she'd been doing ever since her talk with Dr. Morris. There was something peaceful about being there before the rush. The empty halls, the smell of disinfectant mixed with coffee, the faint echo of her footsteps. She stopped for a moment near the entrance, watching the automatic doors open and close. She remembered how, not long ago, Dr. Morris had walked in through those same doors, unnoticed, dismissed, judged. The memory still stung, but now it served as a quiet reminder of how much could change in such a short time. Ellen made her way to the front desk. She brewed a small pot of coffee for herself and her co-worker, arranged the paperwork neatly, and took a deep breath before logging into the system. The screen flickered to life, and within seconds the usual flood of tasks appeared. She smiled to herself. Another busy day, but she felt ready for it. By the time the clock hit 8, patients had already begun filling the waiting area. A few familiar faces showed up. A man who came weekly for therapy sessions, a woman who always brought her son for checkups, an elderly couple who came early just to chat before their appointment. Ellen greeted each one with warmth, using their names when she could remember them. "Morning, Mr. Grant. How's the knee today?" He chuckled, tapping his cane. "Still squeaky like an old door. But I'm getting there," Ellen smiled. "That's good to hear. You're almost due for your next physical therapy session, right?" "Tomorrow," he said proudly. Wouldn't miss it. These small exchanges had become her favorite part of the day. They reminded her why she'd chosen this job in the first place. Not just to handle forms or answer calls, but to be part of people's stories. Around mid-morning, the automatic doors opened again. A group of administrators walked in, followed by Dr. Morris. She was dressed in a navy blue suit today, her hair neatly tied back, carrying her usual calm presence. Conversations in the lobby softened slightly as people noticed her. There was something about her that made everyone instinctively straighten up, not out of fear, but respect. Ellen smiled when their eyes met. Dr. Morris nodded politely and said, "Good morning, Nurse Matthews. Good morning." "Dr. Morris," Ellen replied. The group moved toward the conference room for a meeting, and Ellen returned to her work. But a few minutes later, a message popped up on her screen. Staff announcement. All department heads to attend a short briefing in conference room B at noon. Ellen wasn't part of management, but something told her this meeting was about the new changes Dr. Morris had been planning. When noon came, the halls buzzed with quiet excitement. People whispered about what might be discussed. Rumors of a new training program, better schedules, maybe even improvements to patient care policies. Ellen didn't go to the meeting, of course. She stayed at the desk helping patients as usual, but when her coworker came back afterward, she looked eager to share. "You won't believe this," she said in a low voice. "Dr. Morris is launching something new. It's called the Human First Initiative. It's supposed to make the hospital more patient-centered, like focusing on empathy, communication, and teamwork. Ellen raised an eyebrow. That sounds really good. Her coworker nodded. And she mentioned you, by the way. Said you were going to help with the training part? Ellen blinked. She did, yes. Everyone was kind of surprised. But she said your story inspired her idea. For a moment, Ellen didn't know how to react. Her heart swelled with both pride and humility. The same mistake that had once filled her with embarrassment had somehow turned into something positive. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Dr. Morris met with different staff members to gather ideas. She wanted the training to be practical, not just lectures about rules. I don't want people memorizing scripts, she said during one of the sessions. I want them to understand what compassion looks like in real situations. Ellen sat beside her, taking notes, occasionally sharing her own thoughts. It still felt strange sitting in a meeting with the hospital director, but Dr. Morris treated her as an equal. That respect gave Ellen the courage to speak up. One afternoon, they discussed scenarios that would help staff reflect on their behavior. What if we start with real stories? Ellen suggested. Moments where someone felt ignored or moments that changed them for the better. If people see themselves in those stories, maybe they'll understand faster. Dr. Morris smiled. Exactly. Real stories speak louder than rules. They worked late that evening, shaping the first training session. By the time they finished, the sky outside had turned dark, and most of the staff had already gone home. As they walked out together, Ellen said softly, "You know, I used to think people like you didn't notice small things, like how we talk to patients or how tired we are." Dr. Morris smiled gently. "I notice everything. Before I worked in administration, I was a nurse too. I remember what it felt like to be overwhelmed. That's why I care so much about fixing it." Ellen looked surprised. "You were a nurse?" "Yes," Dr. Morris said, smiling. "For almost 10 years. I worked night shifts, ran between rooms, and learned that sometimes kindness healed faster than medicine." Ellen felt a sudden warmth in her chest. "That explains a lot." Dr. Morris laughed softly. "Maybe it does." The next week, the first Human First session was held in one of the large conference rooms. Chairs were arranged in a circle and soft music played in the background. Instead of formal speeches, Dr. Morris wanted everyone to talk freely. Ellen stood nervously at the front with a small stack of papers. "I'm not really a public speaker," she said with a shy smile, "but I wanted to share something that changed me." She told them about the day she turned away a woman she thought was just another walk-in. She spoke openly about her frustration, her bad mood, and how she judged someone by appearance. The room stayed silent as she described how she later learned that the woman was the new hospital director. There were no gasps, no whispers, just quiet understanding. She finished by saying, "That day embarrassed me, yes. But it also reminded me that everyone who walks through these doors deserves respect, no matter what they look like, where they come from, or what kind of day I'm having." When she finished, the room broke into gentle applause. A few people even had tears in their eyes. Dr. Morris stepped forward. "This," she said softly, "is exactly what I mean. Growth doesn't come from perfection. It comes from reflection. We can all learn from Ellen's story because every one of us has had a day where we forgot the human side of our work." From that day on, something shifted in the hospital's atmosphere. The training sessions became regular, and Ellen became one of the key people helping to lead them. She met with new employees, listened to their concerns, and shared her experiences honestly. The change didn't happen overnight, but little by little things improved. Nurses started greeting patients more kindly. Doctors made time to explain procedures carefully. Even the security guards at the entrance began saying good morning to everyone who walked in. It wasn't perfect. Hospitals never were. But it was progress. One afternoon, while Ellen was sorting files, she noticed a commotion near the front entrance. A young man was arguing with the receptionist, clearly upset. "I've been waiting for hours," he said angrily. "No one's even looked at me." The old Ellen might have sighed or avoided getting involved. But not this time. She walked over, her voice calm but firm. "Hi there, what seems to be the problem?" The man turned frustrated. "I'm just trying to get someone to help my grandmother. She's in pain and no one's listening." Ellen glanced at the older woman sitting nearby, holding her stomach, her face pale. "I'm so sorry," Ellen said gently. Let me take care of this right away. She quickly got a nurse to bring a wheelchair and escorted them to an available doctor. Within minutes, the situation was under control. The young man's anger softened into relief. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to yell. I just didn't know what to do." "It's okay," Ellen said with a warm smile. "You were worried. Anyone would be." When she returned to the desk, she caught Dr. Morris watching from across the hall. Their eyes met for a second, and Dr. Morris gave her a small nod, a silent sign of pride. That moment meant more to Ellen than any award or bonus could. It was a sign that she was finally living the lesson she had learned. Weeks turned into months, and the hospital continued to change. Patient satisfaction scores went up. Complaints went down. Staff turnover slowed. People started to feel proud again. One day during a meeting, Dr. Morris announced a new recognition program. "We're going to start honoring staff members who show exceptional compassion," she said. "Not for the biggest medical achievements, but for the small moments of humanity that often go unnoticed." When the first award ceremony took place, Ellen stood quietly in the back, clapping for others. But to her surprise, Dr. Morris called her name. "Ellen Matthews," she said with a smile, "for reminding us all that a single act of humility can change an entire workplace." The applause that followed felt different this time. It wasn't polite, it was heartfelt. Ellen walked up, eyes glistening, and accepted the small glass plaque. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't think I deserve this, but I'll do my best to keep earning it." Dr. Morris smiled. "You already have." After the ceremony, several staff members came up to her to thank her for sharing her story. Some said it gave them courage to admit their own mistakes. Others said it reminded them why they joined healthcare in the first place. Later that night after her shift, Ellen stood outside the hospital for a long time. The building glowed softly under the streetlights. She thought about how far she had come, from that morning when she brushed off a stranger to now, being part of something that was truly changing lives. She realized that real growth doesn't happen in big leaps. It happens in small, consistent steps. One kind gesture, one honest conversation, one humble apology at a time. The rain began to fall again, gentle and steady, like the rhythm of a new beginning. She tilted her face up to the sky and smiled. Tomorrow would be another busy day, but that was okay. She was ready for it. Inside those hospital walls, she had found more than a job. She had found purpose. And sometimes purpose begins with a simple mistake, one that teaches you how to truly see people again. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and life at St. Mary's Hospital started to feel different in the best possible way. The place had always been busy, noisy, and full of tension, but lately there was something lighter in the air. The staff smiled more often. Patients were greeted with genuine warmth. Even small gestures, like a nurse offering water to someone waiting or a doctor taking an extra minute to explain a diagnosis, made the halls feel brighter. For Ellen, it was like seeing the hospital through new eyes. Every time she walked into the building, she remembered how far she'd come. From the day she had turned away the new director to now, helping shape the hospital's new culture. She'd become a quiet leader, not by title but by example. People noticed the way she handled tough situations, how she spoke to patients and how she treated her co-workers. The younger staff often came to her for advice, and she never turned them away. One rainy morning, Ellen arrived early as usual. The sky outside was gray, and the sound of raindrops against the windows filled the empty lobby. She hung up her coat, made herself a cup of coffee, and began sorting through the day's schedule. The calm before the storm, that's what she called this hour before the real rush began. Not long after, Dr. Morris walked in, holding a folder under her arm. She looked a little tired but still composed, as always. "Good morning, Ellen," she said with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Dr. Morris," Ellen replied. "You're here early." "I wanted to check on the new patient feedback system," Dr. Morris said. "We've been getting some interesting results." She placed the folder on the counter and opened it. Inside were printed sheets showing patient surveys. "Look at this," she said, pointing to one of the charts. "Our satisfaction scores have gone up by 30% since we started the Human First initiative." Ellen's eyes widened. "That's incredible." "It's more than I expected," Dr. Morris said. "And I think you had a lot to do with it." Ellen shook her head modestly. "It wasn't just me. Everyone's been working hard. You gave them a reason to care again? Dr. Morris smiled softly. Maybe, but leadership isn't about one person. It's about what we bring out in each other. You've helped me remind this hospital of something important. Before Ellen could respond, the phone rang and she quickly picked it up. It was the emergency department calling for some paperwork. She handled the call efficiently, and when she hung up, Dr. Morris was still standing there watching her with quiet admiration. I'll be doing a walkthrough today, Dr. Morris said. Want to join me? Ellen blinked in surprise. You mean with you? Yes, Dr. Morris said. I like having different perspectives. You see things from the front lines that I might miss. Ellen hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I'd love to. They began their walk through the hospital together. The halls were already filling with activity. Nurses pushing carts, doctors checking charts, patients being wheeled to appointments. As they walked, Dr. Morris greeted people by name. She remembered details about their families, their interests, even their pets. It amazed Ellen how she could balance being in charge while staying so human. At one point, they stopped by the pediatric ward. A small boy sat on a hospital bed, his leg in a cast, looking glum. His mother was trying to cheer him up with a coloring book, but he didn't seem interested. Dr. Morris walked over with a gentle smile. Hey there, she said softly. That's quite a cast you've got. What happened? The boy shrugged. Fell off my bike. Ouch, Dr. Morris said with mock seriousness. That must have been some bike. You planning to get back on it when you're better? The boy looked up, a small smile forming. Yeah, my dad said I can if I wear knee pads next time. That's the spirit, Dr. Morris said. I used to fall a lot too when I was your age. I still have a scar on my knee to prove it. The boy giggled, and his mother smiled gratefully. As they walked away, Ellen said softly, You're really good with people. Dr. Morris smiled. That's what this job is about. Not the paperwork or the meetings, it's the people. Their walk continued through different departments. They spoke to nurses who were short-staffed, janitors who worked late hours, and even security guards at the back entrance. Dr. Morris thanked each one personally, asking how things could be improved. When they reached the cafeteria, they decided to sit for a few minutes. The smell of freshly baked rolls filled the air, and the faint chatter of staff echoed around them. Do you ever get tired of carrying all this responsibility? Ellen asked. Dr. Morris thought for a moment. Sometimes. But then I remember why I took this job. I wanted to make a difference, not just in how medicine is practiced, but in how people are treated. She paused, then added, When I walked in that first day and you turned me away, it hurt, yes. But it also reminded me that change starts with moments like that. Small, uncomfortable moments that open our eyes. Ellen looked down, still a bit embarrassed about that day, though it felt like a lifetime ago. I'm grateful you didn't hold it against me. Dr. Morris shook her head. Holding grudges doesn't heal anyone. Forgiveness does, and you've proven yourself more than enough times since then. Ellen smiled faintly. Thank you. I just wish I'd understood sooner. Most people learn the hard way, Dr. Morris said. What matters is that you learned. Just then, an announcement came over the speaker system. Code Blue, room 214. The calm atmosphere vanished instantly. Nurses rushed past them toward the stairs. Dr. Morris stood up immediately, her expression focused. Let's go, she said. Ellen followed her up to the second floor where the scene unfolded. A patient had gone into cardiac arrest. Doctors and nurses surrounded the bed, working quickly and efficiently. Dr. Morris stepped aside, letting the medical team do their job. But she observed carefully, making mental notes about how smoothly they coordinated. After several tense minutes, they managed to stabilize the patient. The lead doctor exhaled in relief, thanking the team for their quick response. Dr. Morris approached and said, Good work, everyone. That was handled beautifully. On their way back down, Ellen noticed how calm Dr. Morris remained. Her presence alone seemed to bring steadiness to any situation. Once things settled, they stopped by the nurses' station. One of the younger nurses looked shaken, still catching her breath. Ellen walked over and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You did great, she said. That was a tough one, but you stayed focused. The nurse nodded weakly. It just gets to me sometimes, you know. We do everything we can, but it's still so heavy. Dr. Morris joined them. That's completely normal, she said gently. We see people at their worst moments. It's okay to feel it. Just don't let it harden you. Take breaks, talk to someone, and remember that caring is your strength, not your weakness. The nurse smiled faintly. Thank you, ma'am. Afterward, as they walked back toward the main lobby, Ellen said quietly, I used to think being professional meant hiding emotions, but now I see that empathy doesn't make us weaker. It makes us better. Dr. Morris nodded. Exactly. Compassion doesn't slow us down. It keeps us human. The next few weeks were filled with similar moments, challenges, small victories, lessons that reminded everyone why they did what they did. The hospital's transformation became something people from other places started noticing. Nearby clinics began reaching out, asking about the Human First program. Even a local newspaper wrote an article about the positive changes at St. Mary's, calling it the hospital with a heart. Ellen read that article 3 times. It didn't mention her by name, but she didn't mind. Just knowing she'd been part of it was enough. One afternoon, she was at the front desk when a woman walked in. She looked nervous, clutching a folder of documents. Ellen smiled warmly and said, Good afternoon. How can I help you today? The woman hesitated. I'm looking for a job, actually. I used to work as a nurse's aide before I moved. Someone told me this hospital treats its staff really well. Ellen handed her a form. You heard right. We believe in teamwork and kindness here. You'll fit right in. The woman smiled in relief. Thank you. That means a lot. After she left, Ellen couldn't help but feel proud. The hospital's reputation wasn't just about its medical care anymore. It was about its heart. Later that day, Dr. Morris stopped by again, carrying her laptop and a cup of tea. You're going to like this, she said. We're planning a staff appreciation week, a way to thank everyone for their hard work. I want you on the planning team. Ellen laughed softly. You really don't let me rest, do you? Dr. Morris smiled. Not when you're this good at what you do. As they talked, Ellen realized how much their relationship had evolved. They weren't just director and employee anymore. They were partners in purpose. There was mutual respect and even friendship. That evening, as Ellen prepared to leave, she noticed Dr. Morris still in her office, the light on, typing away. Ellen knocked lightly on the door. You're still here? Dr. Morris looked up and smiled. Just finishing up a few reports. You work too much, Ellen said kindly. Even directors need rest, Dr. Morris chuckled. You sound like me talking to the nurses, Ellen smiled. Then maybe you should take your own advice. Dr. Morris leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. You know, sometimes I forget that part. It's easy to focus on everyone else and forget to breathe. Ellen nodded. Happens to the best of us. They talked for a few more minutes and about work, life, and how strange it was that one small encounter had changed both of their paths. As Ellen left, she paused at the doorway. You changed this place, you know, she said softly. Dr. Morris looked up. No, we changed it. Together. Ellen smiled, nodded, and walked out. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the evening sky was turning golden. The air smelled fresh, like the world had just been washed clean. Ellen stood for a moment, breathing it in. She thought about everything that had happened since that morning months ago. The mistake, the lesson, the transformation. She thought about how people can change, not just with time, but with courage and humility. It struck her that leadership didn't always come from titles. Sometimes it came from moments of grace, from being willing to learn, to listen, to forgive, and to start again. As she walked to her car, she saw the reflection of the hospital lights on the wet pavement. It looked warm and alive, like a beacon in the night. She smiled to herself, knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. And as she drove away, she realized something simple but powerful. That kindness wasn't just part of her job anymore. It was her way of life. The hospital glowed softly under the evening lights. The long hallways, once filled with cold tension and hurried footsteps, now carried laughter, greetings, and quiet words of comfort. It was a different place now, more than just a hospital. It had become a community built on respect and kindness. Months had passed since the day Ellen and Dr. Morris first had that difficult conversation in the office. What began as an uncomfortable lesson had grown into a story of transformation. Every department had changed in its own way. The nurses worked more closely with patients. The reception staff treated each person with patience. And even the janitorial team took pride in being part of something meaningful. For Ellen, every morning still began with the same ritual: coffee, a deep breath, and a moment of gratitude. She never forgot how different things used to be. That memory wasn't painful anymore. It was her motivation. That morning felt especially peaceful. The sun had just started to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Ellen sat by the front desk, flipping through charts. The first few patients of the day had already arrived, and she greeted each one with her usual warm smile. Around mid-morning, Dr. Morris walked in wearing a bright blue blazer. She looked calm but had an air of excitement about her. "Morning, Ellen," she said, holding a small envelope in her hand. "Good morning," Ellen replied. "You seem happy today." Dr. Morris smiled. "I am. I've been waiting for this day for a while." Ellen raised an eyebrow. "What's happening?" "You'll see," Dr. Morris said with a playful tone. "I'll need you in the conference room at noon." Ellen laughed softly. "Should I be worried?" "Not at all," Dr. Morris said. "Just curious." The morning passed quickly. The hospital hummed with its usual rhythm. The beeping of monitors, the soft conversations, the sound of wheels rolling over the floors. But Ellen couldn't help wondering what the envelope was about. She noticed a few other staff members whispering and smiling when Dr. Morris walked by. Something was definitely going on. Finally, noon arrived. Ellen headed toward the conference room, adjusting her uniform as she walked. When she opened the door, she was stunned. The room was decorated with balloons, flowers, and a banner that read, "Thank you for making a difference." Dozens of staff members were there: nurses, doctors, technicians, even the cleaning crew. Everyone was smiling. Dr. Morris stood near the front with a microphone in her hand. Ellen froze for a moment, unsure what to do. "What is this?" she asked softly. Dr. Morris grinned. "This, my dear Ellen, is for you." "For me?" Ellen blinked in disbelief. Dr. Morris nodded. "Yes, you didn't just change yourself, you helped change this entire hospital." Ellen felt her face grow warm. "Oh, I don't deserve all that credit." "Yes, you do," Dr. Morris said kindly. "When I first arrived here, this place had lost its heart. People were tired, disconnected, and just going through the motions. But one person's courage to learn from a mistake created a ripple that touched everyone. That person is you." The room broke into applause. Ellen stood frozen, her hands over her mouth. She could feel tears filling her eyes. Dr. Morris continued, "You reminded all of us that humility and kindness are the real foundation of care. Because of you, we started the Human First Initiative. Because of you, our hospital became known as a place where every patient is treated like family. And because of you, this team learned what compassion truly means." Ellen couldn't hold back her tears anymore. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say nothing," Dr. Morris said with a smile. "Just know that your actions made a difference." The applause grew louder. Some of the nurses hugged her. Others patted her back. The janitor she always chatted with in the mornings handed her a small card that said, "You inspire us." It was handwritten by the entire cleaning crew. Ellen laughed through her tears. "I don't know how you all kept this secret," she said. Dr. Morris chuckled. "We've been planning it for weeks. We wanted to surprise you before the hospital board meeting tomorrow." "The board meeting?" Ellen asked. "Yes," Dr. Morris said. "The hospital board has approved a new recognition program. And guess who's getting the first community care award?" Ellen's eyes widened. "No." "Yes," Dr. Morris said warmly. "You." The room filled with cheers again. Ellen felt overwhelmed, but in the best possible way. She had never imagined this moment. All she ever wanted was to do her job better, to treat people with kindness, to make up for the mistakes she once made. She never expected recognition or praise. Dr. Morris handed her the envelope she'd been carrying earlier. Inside was a beautiful letter with the hospital's logo embossed at the top. It read, "In recognition of your outstanding compassion, professionalism, and leadership, we honor you for embodying the true spirit of care. Your example has reminded us all that the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the biggest changes." At the bottom was Dr. Morris's signature, along with the hospital board seal. Ellen held the letter close, her eyes brimming again. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Dr. Morris smiled. "You earned every bit of this, Ellen, and I couldn't be prouder." After the gathering, people stayed to talk and share stories. Some mentioned how Ellen had helped them through stressful shifts. Others remembered times she'd comforted worried families or gone out of her way to help a patient feel seen. By the time the crowd thinned out, Ellen and Dr. Morris were the last two in the room. They sat together sipping coffee in the quiet that followed all the excitement. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Dr. Morris asked softly. Ellen nodded. "All the time. It feels like another lifetime now." Dr. Morris smiled faintly. "That day changed both of us.